wonderful having all of you here with us this evening, and I want to actually talk about drones. The only time someone said to me the other day, India has entered the drone club, and the only time I'd come across this word, the drones club, was in PG Woodhouse. Now, of course, drones have become household names. We all know kinds of drones, loitering ammunition, this ammunition, that ammunition. So I'm just going to ask you, look, there were many learnings from Operation Sindoor also. So, General Saxena, the question is, how did Idea Forge adopt its drone solutions for the extreme terrain and climatic conditions during Operation Sindoor? I mean, there are varied terrains along the border, as you know. So, how did the deployment, what did the deployment teach you? What were the lessons?
So, couple of things. Obviously the journey didn't start from Op Sindoor, right? That was probably a culmination of whatever we did. So it started off way back in 2007-8, and I'll not go through that, how it started and all of that. But the inflection point came in 2016-17, somewhere thereof. What happened is the army called for a peculiar, requirement of theirs, right? And the world over, so we're lucky to have the Himalayas, and a lot of technologies which get made here will get made by either India or by the Chinese, because we only have Himalayas, right? The rest nobody has. It has its own challenges as well. So what happened in that particular requirement is that everybody envisioned what the requirement is, in a very different manner. And we thought, this is not going to work. And we took a contrary call to what the world was doing. And we were competing against the Americans, the Ukrainians also, and it was a global, contest, so to say, or it was actually a global RFP. We pioneered a technology called the VTOL, right, which is a vertical takeoff and landing, and then you kind of move into a fixed wing mode. So I think it started from there, right, that you started to develop solutions and technologies which were fit for your own terrain. And then, of course, you started to, get into areas because of the complex terrains, complex, environments in which we deal in. Now, coming back to Op Sindoor, right, a lot of our drones were used for ISR activities. And ISR is the kind of the bedrock of, unless you don't know what's happening on the other side or what you're doing, you're kind of be purblind, right? Now, one of the things which we faced is, prior to this, we haven't seen any EW electronic warfare, right? So you pretty much had a free pass. You could do whatever. No longer, all right? Were we geared up for it? I would say partially. We were geared up for it. We had solutions. So one of the learnings which came up is that even if I iterated in that 84-hour or 80-hour window, I had a solution for it. I didn't have the capability to transfer that solution to the front line. So that's a big lesson which I have learned, and I think the user has also learned. So we, what we could do in that time frame was look at some bit of ConOps and use the technology in a very different manner so as to fulfill whatever tasks which were assigned. But could we reiterate or iterate? Well, that window wasn't available. We had the solution, but we hadn't had the window to go and implement it. And that's something which we all need to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the Defense Secretary has talked about the importance of innovation. So, Major Indrabalan, I have to ask you this because, you've both experienced the front line and the lab conditions in some ways. What role do you see the technologies that we've employed, swarm technologies? You also saw a swarm coming across the border. It's quite scary for a large number of people to witness all of that. What role do you see that playing in the future, and specifically in the type of operations that we witnessed?
Yeah, so firstly, I see an inflection point right in front of us. Usually such a conclave will be attended by mostly men. Now I see more Sindoors here. So that itself shows that there's an inflection point happening in a different way. But that notwithstanding, the entire drone technology, I think, started taking off from the Azerbaijan and the Russian war that happened, the Ukraine-Russian war. India was still building on, I mean, trying to catch up with whether we can use drone that effectively or not. Though drones came into India a long time back. But to be able to effectively use it as a weapon system and not merely a surveillance system, I think this has happened with Sindoor. And it is Sindoor, whether it is SWARM or LM or any kind of delivery mechanism, that has taught us that is a long way to go. For India to be able to produce weapon systems which are completely indigenous, which are in terms of not just in terms of ammunition that you fire it, but the deep technology of the drone. That is where I think India needs to focus a lot. That's one of the lessons that has come out. For simple example, is that while the drone has its aerodynamics, it has its airframe, it has its propellers, everything is there. But that is one part of the drone. The main point of the drone is its brain, the autopilot or the control system, and the navigation system, the telemetry. Now, these are the things I think we have realized during Operation Sindoor. This needs extreme focus. And in terms of our ability to match with world-level technologies or even what China uses, we are way, way behind. A lot of catching up to do.
So what's the specific feedback loop that you've got? You've talked about Operation Sindoor as being this learning curve. What exactly has been the feedback? And where are the gaps? Because that's really important to address, isn't it?
Of course, there are a good number of gaps. While all the sessions we've had so far are very positive, but I would rather be apprehensive and skeptical so that we learn the right lessons and we give the right message. Why so is because majority of the drones that we have deployed recently were, let's agree that they were assembled drones. They were manufactured, but I'm sure there are companies catching up. But in terms of the deep technology, we are still dependent on systems, the electronic systems, which are not entirely indigenized. And if that happens, the lessons that we learned, the spoofing of the drone that we heard of, the jamming of the drone that we heard of, the cyber attacks on the drone that we heard of, it's all because this technology is not yet indigenized. And this lesson needs to be taken forward. We need to create drone stacks, cyber stacks, and the kind of telemetry system. Navigation is another major thing. While a drone can have a navigation system, it can have an RTK-based system, it has a GPS system, but if that system is not supported by our own systems, the drone can get spoofed, it can get jammed. If you are dependent on GPS, that is the American system, GPS is owned by the American Air Force. So if you don't depend on American GPS to fly your drones, you know how vulnerable you are. If you're going to depend on Chinese Baidu to fly your drones, you know how vulnerable you are. Whether Navik is yet ready for our drones, well, I'm sure the DRDO has used Navik to a great extent for inertial navigation. But is it available to our drones yet? Well, to some extent it is. But have we developed a system where Navik is fully, providing us that is one area of major, I would say, challenge that we have to face. The second challenge is about the telemetry of the drone. Now, a drone has a transmission mechanism, which is a transmission module, an RF transmission module. It can be a CDMA or a mobile transmission module, microwave. It can also be a satellite transmission module. Now, all these transmission modules, the basic modules are not in India. They have to be imported. So, I'm just giving a simple example. This transmission module is what transmits all types of data. Imagine this transmission module is not yours, and it is foreign origin. Hopefully, it is not Chinese origin, but the cheapest today available is Chinese origin. Whatever data you capture, whatever data you transmit, a bug can relate elsewhere. So this critical part of transmission module has to get indigenized. There is no doubt about it. So I spoke of three components, which I think we as drone industry and the government must focus on. All other parts are either, as I said, time leads in manufacturing, or maybe it is not sensitive to the extent of national security. So if I have to draw a good lesson on three different drone techs which we need to understand, ones that affect the sensitivity of the drone, the brain of the drone, the communication system, the navigation system. This is where the government's focus should be on entirely. Second is what is shortfall, the battery system or the power system, and also, let's say, the propeller system, etc., and the propulsion system. These are also critical, but not as critical as the first one because it doesn't affect your national security. And the third one are those parts which can be sourced in raw material merit here, which are less critical. So if these lessons are properly brought into the system, I think we are good to go ahead from here.
Well, Major General, you've been very honest, and one must compliment you for your honesty, because the only way we can actually address the situation is if we actually assess it right. So thank you very much for that, and I think you deserve an actual round of applause, because it's only when we question ourselves that we actually challenge ourselves. So Smita, let me come to you. What mechanisms are being considered to enable faster access for Indian drone manufacturers to restricted or dual-use technologies, like encrypted communications or IR sensors? Because this is something, if you take off from where the Major General ended, would be the next obvious question to ask.
So first of all, thank you, Rahul and the group, for having me over. I will give some context on the question and then the answer, Rahul. See, the scenario of war, as we know, is changing. The first conflict was with people and sticks very close to each other. And you take that example where there is a person and a weapon. With every conflict, both the weapon and the person are going far away from each other, and the weapon is getting complicated, and it's becoming improved, and there is a lot of tech being built and all. And very recently, this distance of the weapon and the adversary being far, and the weapon being complex is exponentially, this complexity is exponentially increasing. So there are many more learnings beyond just building tech, which is that technology with any learning still cannot be built in a day. So there is a requirement for anticipation, war gaming, planning. In that anticipation, building a roadmap, and then building technologies based on roadmap. So we have a lot of learnings from Operation Sindoor. With the detailed learning from Operation Sindoor as well, and any amount of time given, of course, a lot of technology was never going to be possible to be developed in that short span for the same op as well. So we can have a lot of learnings, but do we want to, only look at shortcomings and stopgap solutions? So one of the institutional learnings that we are also advocating for the industry and the user to work together is do more scenario thinking and war gaming, specifically in the context of these modern weapons, which is the future aerial weapons called drones, that is going to be the future warfare. For conventional weapons, we have a lot of institutional mechanism, a lot of this war gaming and all of this there, but not for drones. So that's the one thing. What will this lead to? This will lead to an absolute clarity on how it has to be used, what all future uses can be employed on, and if the weapon has to be used like this, what all technologies and resilience, which sir mentioned, would be required. So this thinking is the first step. Second thing is, in any conflict, you cannot really look back at the manufacturer and say, give me weapons. So there is a need for some kind of stockpiling and equipment ratios and all of that, which should be there. Which for drones, because we were not employing drones in active conflict as such till now, was not really the focus. So that is one more thing that is required. And coming to the specific question which you mentioned about the critical technologies, the access of which supposedly India does not have. Well, Indian Army recently conducted an exercise where about in the most complex EW hardened environment, as we like to call it, which has jamming, spoofing and all of the other things. This happened at about 3 locations. There are more than 5 manufacturers who have already demonstrated some of the capabilities. So totally saying that India does not have these capabilities is, in my opinion, in a wrong statement as such. India has some of these capabilities. Of course, we need to work very hard on this. And the only way to work hard in this domain is not just technology transfer, but building capabilities in-house, in the IDDM mode. In any future scenario, even if we have a technology transfer or a JV with a foreign company, while we may want an urgent requirement and we may be slightly dependent on that foreign company, there is one more dimension that is coming in. The country that we are dependent on may also be engaged in a conflict. Like one of the countries is already engaged in a conflict. Their manufacturing needs may be prioritized for their needs, for their requirements, their conflict.
You're talking about Israel.
Yes. So while we have been talking about, buying from outside, then transitioning to make in India, there is a thin line which is the made in India, which we need to focus on. And yes, we need to partner with companies, but we need to partner in buying the technology out and performing technology enhancements as well as manufacturing them in India. Otherwise, if we continue to depend on them, yes, we will have very good technology transfer. We'll make it in India. We'll employ the weapon in a conflict. We will have a learning. But then for improvement of that technology, you still have to be dependent on that country. For example, Israel, who is already busy in something else. You are not a priority for the country now, that country. So what do you do then? The only way to go ahead for all these emerging weapons is to design in India and make in India, not just make in India. So that's one of the key things that needs to be focused on. And of course, one statement to your question, the research community, the industry and the government, all three are working together to very well define these problem statements and gap areas, some of which Sir alluded to, and are looking at very strategic interventions on how we are going to fund the research in India and what companies are we going to work from outside to bring the technology here, but with a specific focus again on design enhancement and capturing of that critical technology in India so that we get this transfer once and we don't continue to depend on this other country or the company as such.
So what we heard from the Defence Ministry, Major Saxena, was that, look, the orders will come. So there'll be two challenges, I presume. One is that you'll have to scale up production. Is there a scalability challenge? That, of course, you have to build drones that are not just ready for an operation immediately, but also, of course, to replace, etc., etc. So that's one. Two, the point that Smith Shah and I think Major General also referred to, which is that it can't just be a print, and you're just given a print to execute, and you have to bring out something. You have to innovate, because there's not going to be any shortage of orders, and you don't want the government then to sort of turn focus and look abroad, say that you guys are not capable. So how do you meet this challenge?
So, very interesting question, okay. The way I look at it, I'm a big fan of a BCG 2x2, model, right? If you look at it from a demand and supply.
BCG means, I'm just, for our...
Boston
viewers.
Consulting Group, the 2x2 matrix model, right?
Okay.
So, if you're running any business, right, you have to look at the demand and the supply side. That's one consideration. Today, the second consideration, which often gets talked about, is about capability versus capacity.
Yes.
Right? I can guarantee, on this stage, and we've done it, we have the capability. And not only IdeaForge as a company. There are many other firms, and Smith is right there, who's from DFI. He deals with many other companies. We have the capability. There is no dearth of capability. Yes, has to be an incremental capability? Yes, there will be incremental.
So you're saying there's no dearth of capability?
There is no dearth of capability. There is dearth of capacity, however. Capacity is a question mark. You run a business, let's say, when you run a business, 60-70% of your revenue has to come from run rate business, which I call it business as usual, right? Maybe 30% could be variable. Today, it's exactly the opposite, right? 80% of my business today is lumpy variable business. And that's where
And why is that?
Because, because you're dependent on the defense, and there is no continuous, so to say, orders, etc., which are coming through. It's a very lumpy business. And the moment that lumpy business is, for me to really, put capacity there is a big issue.
No, but I mean, the Defense Secretary seemed to suggest that we'll flood the market with orders.
We will. We will. It hasn't happened till now, and I'm hoping it will, right? So that's the point number one. The thing is, and as an industry, as a company, I also look at Zara, let's just say, okay? Zara is the master of, so to say, looking at how do I look at variability, how do I look at varied demand and all. So we are also learning, as an industry also, we are learning that, if it is not continued capacity or continued demand, how do I really look at some of these things? The bigger issue, and the bigger thing which we need to understand is that a lot of us are talking of Ukraine, Russia, Israel, and all of that, right? It is, and we pick up some technology, and the biggest disservice we are doing to ourselves is that we pick up a technology and we say, this worked. Well, that's not the case. You have to go a layer deeper. You have to, peel the layers of the onion, right? The thing is that the tactics is going to get copied very easily. I'll do a thing, you'll probably do a counter in 15 days, and I'll do something, and especially in protracted battles, this thing's going to happen. What we need to focus on is capability. Do I have the capability? If you do something, do I have the capability? Do I have the industry which will be there at the front line and give me bug fixes, give me features, give me updates on my platform so that I can counter that. That's the capability which we should be talking of, and that capability will only come from Indian firms. A Lockheed Martin will not give you
So
anything.
strong pitch is being made for make in India, innovate in India, made in India.
Absolutely.
So Major General, let me ask you this. Do you share the optimism or the confidence that the Major has here about the fact that we have the capability?
Okay. In terms of human wear, I think we have tremendous capability. There is no doubt. I represent a company called as Amber Wings and the E-Plane.
Yeah.
E-Plane is a company which is building India's first flying taxi. There are only 5 companies in the world which are even attempting that. And we have 7 aerospace PhDs, 35 plus MTechs working on different technologies.
Wow. And they're from all educated in India or from all over the world?
All over, but they're all Indian talent. And they're creating something world class. So while they're developing this an E-plane concept, they have recently decided to move on to the defense sector because we realize we need to be there as well for good reasons. Now, if this capability is capitalized, as you said, I'm optimistic and I'm confident both. But I'm also pessimistic. Why I'm pessimistic? Not because I don't want to be optimistic. I want to be pessimistic so that we come up with the right technology. And in doing that, one of the pessimism I will reflect is the problem of the policy initiatives in India. For instance, in Coimbatore, we had 35 lakhs worth of drone which was recently captured. Chinese drones.
Sorry?
DFIs.
You mentioned captured.
Chinese drones.
Captured.
Captured means they were illegally being smuggled inside. Why are they coming in? In India today, we have 15,000 ETF 610 drones all over India.
What do those mean?
They have just been imported. Now, on one hand, we are talking of indigenization. On the other hand, we are allowing these drones to come in as SKDs or CKDs and flood Indian markets. Now, when you talk of indigenization, the indigenization should achieve 3 levels of what we should achieve. In normal cases, you are talking about agri-industry, indigenization should achieve so that Indian manufacturing industry gets promoted. That's all the aim is. So you do that kind of indigenization policy initiative. But when it comes to defense, it is not just about providing opportunities to our youngsters. It's about national security. So your indigenization policy, when you talk of the IC content, should focus on what is more important from national security perspective and also from R&D perspective so that we own technology than from simply giving opportunities for startups to start something or people to manufacture something. Now this differentiation is what will lead us to right policy initiatives. And if you don't do this, you will end up similar things happening. Now, as the Defense Secretary rightly said, obviously huge orders are likely to come. But if you're going to go by the L1 syndrome, then these huge orders will again pick up what? These so-called Chinese drones coming in. Let me give a simple example. An Indian drone which costs 4.5 lakh rupees, indigenous, there are companies which are today making indigenous drones with 85% indigenous content, is 4.5 lakh rupees. Same Chinese ETF drone is 1.5 lakh rupees. How do you compete?
But is the quality as good?
They're doable, workable. That's because they produce mass. They want to kill our industry. They don't want it to grow. So they will, even if they can't afford it at 1.5, they're here to make sure that our R&D does not happen. They want to make sure that our drone industry doesn't grow. We don't become Atmanirbhar. So unless and until the government's policy addresses the issue of so-called dumping and so-called...
So you want a Trump tariff?
Yeah,
A big one.
Yes, because it's of national security concern. It's not just business. Drones are today national security. Okay, let's talk of simple agri drones. You are flying agri drones today, you're allowing people to just fly. They're flying all over.
Right.
Where are they? Who's holding them? What can they do next? And when they are flying, they're also capturing terrain all over. Where is it all that going? So drones have become a serious national security concern. And if you don't address it at that level, we will end up in situations like what Russia ended up with drones attacking them all over.
So my final question to you before we wrap up, we're running out of time. Maybe one answer from each one of you on this. What is the drone that is working? Because someone said here, I think it was you, Smit Shah, that all kind of drones don't work. So what is that one drone that is working globally, militarily, to inflict a lot of damage, which is the top of its class?
I think in an active conflict, it is the 2-3 loitering munition capabilities. I will not talk about a model because in every country, every conflict, it is a different model.
Okay.
But the new realization is that loitering munitions are also an independent class of UAVs that need to be focused on.
Okay. What about you, Major?
For the ISR so I'll talk about ISR.
What is ISR? Just
ISR is it's basically reconnaissance, right? Intelligence, surveying, and surveillance and reconnaissance, basically to get information out. I think I would say it is us. We are probably at the cutting edge. We have about 84 IPs to ourselves, right? So we are right there at the cutting edge. I don't think so. World over, in the price to performance ratio,
Okay.
I think anybody can beat us.
Major General.
We are that confident.
Yeah, I think we have delivered. It's not that we have not delivered. All types of drones are working, whether it is Idea Forge or it is Rafe or any other company which has applied. There are a lot of drones which have actually grown. My question is not about whether they're working. Are they having the right technology and are they having the indigenous technology? That is what we are sitting here for. If once we agree that that is what we need to focus on, I think we're going the right lines. That's all.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for an enlightening conversation. I think the primetime anchor and me would have wanted the MOD, a representative sitting right there, so we could have had it off. But thank you very much. This was enlightening. Thank you.
Network 18 is now the clear leader in digital media, with 55% more users on native platforms and social media than Times Internet. Network 18, the undisputed leader of news networks, way ahead of the times.